Bitcoin can save the world because Bitcoin can save the world from debt. What? Listen, the world is drowning in debt to the tune of about $315 trillion and counting. We haven't seen debt levels as a percentage to GDP like this since the Napoleonic Wars. Okay, that's a long time ago. To put that in perspective, in 2024, the global GDP was around $110 trillion, which is just over a third of that massive debt number. Another way to visualize it, there's about 8.1 billion people on the planet. If we divided the debt equally, each person would owe about $39,000. So, with global debt at an all-time high, should you be worried? I mean, what can we do? Well, in this video, I will explain how this is a problem. It is, and also how I believe Bitcoin can save the world. Now, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. We got the latest insights on global finance, cryptocurrencies, and practical investment tips coming your way every week. Also, if all this money and crypto talk has you kind of scratching your head, grab my master course on money and crypto. It's 100% free and includes everything I've learned on these topics. But hurry, because it's only free for a limited time. So grab the link below. Now, let's get to it, baby. I was at Bitcoin 24 in Nashville, Tennessee, and I got to hear former independent presidential candidate RFK, Michael Saylor, and former president and current presidential candidate Trump. Listening to them, I felt a surge of hope that confirmed a belief I've held for years. While it might seem like the economy is spiraling and global debts keep rising, there's one solution that stands out to me as capable of reversing this trend and bringing prosperity back to the world. One word, Bitcoin.
I want to talk about the Bitcoin revolution. And I also want to talk about rebuilding our global economy with digital capital.
It's not just a hopeful idea anymore. It's becoming a global game changer. With 2/3 of the US presidential candidates as of right now officially pro-Bitcoin and market adoption growing, Bitcoin is proving to be far more realistic and impactful than ever imagined. We all can see that the world is in a serious predicament right now. Economies are debased from anything real. The currencies are only based on Fugazi. The US has printed more money in the past 6 years than in the entire history of the dollar. China is a house of cards with its shadow housing market. Russia is economically unstable. And according to billionaire former hedge fund manager Ray Dalio, we're at the end of a financial cycle where there's traditionally the world reserve currency getting replaced. The difference this time is the entire world is economically interconnected, and it seems like no one has anything real to save it, or do they? Currently, the US government has net assets of negative 35 trillion. Despite these gloomy realities, the solution that can change the game at this moment is still Bitcoin. Simply buying and holding 1 million Bitcoin for 20 years could cut the national debt by over half. If the US government bought it and held 4 million Bitcoin, it would have a net surplus of $17 trillion. As I've detailed in my free crypto and money course, all it takes for something to have value is for enough people to believe it has value. Now, the longer it maintains its value depends on the strength of the asset. Despite all the FUD, Bitcoin is a nearly perfect digital asset. It's decentralized, it's immutable, it's free from country manipulation. It has a public ledger, which means you can see where everything's happening with it, and it has a fixed supply. But what's more interesting is how the value of Bitcoin keeps increasing with time and has increased in value by over 13,000% in the last 10 years. Think about this. In just 10 years, what other investment has shown returns like Bitcoin? Now, picture what could happen in the next 20 years. Imagine if the US government decides to hold about 4 million Bitcoin in its reserves. This move could make a significant impact on the US economy and cut our current national debt in its entirety. Traditionally, these debt cycles have existed in a pre-digital world. Public debt has been around for at least 2,000 years, used to establish towns, cities, states, nations, and fund wars. Governments have long amassed heavy debts from wartime expenses, such as the Napoleonic Wars, the Franco-Prussian War, and US Civil War in the 19th century. World War II, the most expensive war in history, triggered several debt crises, with most of the outstanding loans being owed to the United States. Economies were tied to physical assets like gold, silver, and oil to offset this debt. But what if this economic cycle is different? Bitcoin offers a unique solution. It's not just some hopeful idea anymore. It's becoming a global game changer with growing market adoption and pro-Bitcoin presidential candidates. Bitcoin's potential to transform the financial landscape is way more realistic and impactful than ever imagined previously. Today, we are facing unimaginable debt for the first time in history, all because we live in a digital world. We could never physically print $1 trillion, let alone $35 trillion. Yet as a global community, we've agreed to rack up $315 trillion in digital debt. So, is it so crazy to think that if digital debt is the problem, the solution could be something digital? How Bitcoin will save the world.
Everything is expensive. If we want to prosper in the 21st century, we need new ideas, and they need to be based on new technology.
I've been saying this for years. It doesn't take widespread adoption for Bitcoin to become incredibly valuable. Think about this. There are 58 million millionaires worldwide. There are 8 billion people on the planet, 190 countries, a global GDP of 105 trillion, and only 21 million Bitcoin. What if, instead of destroying each other's from a country standpoint through war, which historically has been a way of one country transferring wealth to another, and instead of resorting to economic collapse, debt write-downs, restructuring, what if the world adopted a new asset of substantial wealth? As fantastical as it may sound, this seems to be exactly what presidential candidates RFK and Trump are aiming to do. Kennedy made waves with his Bitcoin promises. He said he would transfer the roughly 210,000 Bitcoin currently held by the US government into a Federal Reserve strategic reserve. He claimed that these moves could effectively move Bitcoin to a valuation of hundreds of trillions of dollars. Kennedy praised Bitcoin as the currency of hope. He goes on to explain that Bitcoin is a way to restore financial stability after years of poor monetary policies. Fiat currency was invented to fund wars. Learn your history. Vietnam. Kennedy said adding the Bitcoin standard would eliminate incentives for military conflict. Trump also plans to have the US government immediately move the roughly 210,000 Bitcoin it currently holds into its reserves, but that's not all.
If I am elected, it will be the policy of my administration, United States of America, to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin the US government currently holds or acquires into the future. We'll keep 100%. I hope you do well, please.
Although Kennedy is being boxed out of the two power parties in the US, he rallied against high inflation and shrinking purchasing power, issues he believes adopting a Bitcoin standard would address. Kennedy also pledges to make Bitcoin transactions non-taxable and allow Bitcoin to be exchanged tax-free to US dollars. He said Bitcoin's transparency makes it, and I quote, the greatest foe of government corruption. With Bitcoin becoming a hot topic in the 2024 race, Kennedy is clearly positioning himself as the most Bitcoin-friendly candidate. His call for a massive 4 million Bitcoin held in reserves shows he is willing to take bold positions to attract the growing Bitcoin voter bloc. Also, in our last video, we shared Trump's greatest plans for Bitcoin and how he aims to make the US a friendly ground for cryptocurrency, providing policies that ensure its thriving future.
The Bitcoin community, that the day I take the oath of office, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's anti-crypto crusade will be over. It will end. It'll be done. It'll be done.
Michael Saylor also touched on this in his keynote address. He explained that if countries were to adopt Bitcoin as strategic reserves, it could transform a country like the US from the brink of insolvency to a massive surplus in just a few decades. Saylor also went on to explain that having Bitcoin as a strategic reserve is safe and secured.
$50 trillion or more of digital capital, nobody can take You know, they can't steal it, right? They bomb your country, they invade your border. They're not getting the Bitcoin, right? So this is good for your financial security and your national security.
He predicts that by 2045, Bitcoin could be worth about 13 million a coin.
And at that rate, Bitcoin's $13 million a coin in the year 2045.
If it could lift a country like El Salvador out of poverty, imagine what it'll do to the US economy. The world could restructure its debt like it has in the past, but this time without firing a gun or causing runaway inflation that erodes the wealth of everyone, especially the poor and middle class. But do I think Bitcoin will usher in a world of peace? No, not entirely at least. All right, let's be honest. We already have enough problems with power struggles as it is. Adding a global financial meltdown to the mix would be like throwing a propane tank into an already burning house. And the world right now is the burning house in that example. You'd go from one house burning to an entire street being demolished by the explosion. The future will tell if this is a pipe dream or reality. But one thing is for sure, if the US adopts Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, other world governments will follow. And so will the people of those governments who are smart enough to stop scrolling and learn about what's happening. And that's exactly why I'm offering my History of Money and Crypto Masterclass 100% free. Grab the link below, do not delay. And if you've watched until this point, dab me right there, boom. Subscribe with notifications turned on. And watch my previous video on Trump's Bitcoin promises here. And you keep living your life to the fullest, my friend. I will see you on the next video. Peace!